Yep.
So there are 5 worms that we're going to be talking about today. These are the flatworms, ribbon worms, nematodes, segmented worms, and peanut worms.
I know, peanut worms. Can you believe it? Okay, so the first one we're going to be talking about is flatworms. So they have a soft and elongated flat body with a triangular shaped head and 2 eyes that make them look like they're cross-eyed, but they're actually not.
Wow.
80% of them are parasitic, and this means that they live in other organisms. So for their habitat, they live basically wherever it is moist. But they specifically live in fresh and salt water. But if they do not live in the ocean and they live in areas that are moist, it's typically in tropical or subtropical regions. They eat bacteria and small invertebrates, and they also eat available animal matter. They reproduce sexually and asexually, but more or less they reproduce sexually. And their life cycle is anywhere from 65 to 140 days. And for their anthropogenic impact in humans, flatworms damage their liver, intestines, lungs, and bladder, so not good.
The ribbon worm. The ribbon worm is also known as a nemertean and is related to mollusks and annelids. They can grow up to be about 100 feet long and usually aren't anything more than an inch wide. They are not segmented and instead take the shape of something kind of like a linguine noodle, which you can see here. But despite their noodle resemblance, they can be quite beautiful with vibrant colors or stripes. Oops. Yeah. These worms mostly live in the ocean, but can be found in fresh water and sometimes even on the land.
What?
Despite their interesting appearance, though, these are well-feared predators of annelid worms, crabs, and even fish.
What?
These worms use proboscis, which is similar to a long nose that's just found on mammals, to feed. This is tucked under their bodies when it's not in use, and when they encounter their prey, this nose-like thing comes out from under them and stabs their prey, and then the worm will swallow them whole. And in order to protect itself from its enemies, it secretes a toxic slime. Because of their big appetites, though, moving on, ribbon worms are very essential to commercially important crab and shrimp fisheries because they help keep the population of small fish under control, so they actually benefit humans. And these worms, for reproduction, they reproduce sexually. They have an external fertilization, so they release sperm and eggs into the water so that they can fertilize, not inside of them, which is what externally means. Then their eggs will hatch and develop into short-lived, lessitotrophic larvae before metamorphosizing into juveniles and then into adults. Oh, here's a video. Wow.
Okay, now we're doing nematodes. So nematodes are small, slender worms, and they're surrounded by a non-cellular layer called a cuticle. They eat bacteria, fungi, and microscopic creatures. They produce sexually and asexually, but when they produce sexually, they rely on a zygote to form. For their life cycle, they have many stages. They have an embryonic stage, 4 to 5 larva stages, and they have an adult stage. Typically, they live from 2 to 6 weeks. And for anthropic impact, when nematodes are in human intestines, they cause abdominal pain, diarrhea, and more pain in the abdominal area.
Okay, segmented worms. So segmented worms are also known as annelids, which are pretty much the same thing that you can just find in the dirt at the park. So they are invertebrates with elongated cylindrical bodies divided into different segments. The segments are separated internally by septa, and they possess a coelom, or fluid-filled body cavity, which is a well-developed nervous system and a complete digestive system. Some examples might be like earthworms, leeches, and marine worms. And segmented worms are very adaptable to inhabit diverse environments. So they could be like on the earth, which is like the ones that are in the park that you just find and you can use them to fish. There's freshwater worms, which are like leeches, which are mostly found in lakes, ponds, and streams, and in the ocean, which in the ocean, and they can be found in coral reefs. So for eating habits, the earthworms, they usually consume already dead soil, like sand or something, or like dirt, like soil. And then leeches, they're like parasites, so they feed on blood, so that's why they can get attached to our bodies when we are in the lake. And then the marine worms feed on plankton and other small organisms, depending on what kind of species they are. For reproduction, many are hermaphrodites, but they still need a partner to have cross-fertilization. Then the leeches, they can have separate sex, and they do reproduce sexually. And then reproduction may also involve external fertilization, which is when they release the egg and sperm into the water for them to fertilize on their own. As for the life cycle, earthworms will lay eggs in cocoons, and then they'll hatch into juvenile worms. Marine worms will have planktonic larvae stage before settling, and leeches lay eggs or give birth depending on the species. As for their anthropogenic impact, earthworms improve soil aeration, fertility, and structure, which benefits the agriculture, and they contribute to nutrient cycling in marine ecosystems. But however, the introduction of non-native earthworm species can disrupt ecosystems, and they also can destroy habitats and pollution, and they can harm terrestrial worm populations.
I can do this one. Peanut worms. Oh, oops. Oh. Sorry. Okay. Peanut worms. So their bodies are simple, and they have two parts to their body. They have a leathery trunk, and then the other part is a long portion called an introvert, and this has tentacles and a hook at the tip, as you can see in the photos. The habitat, so they're found in a wide range of places, from shallow coastal waters to deep sea environments. They usually burrow in sand, mud, or crevices in rocks, coral, or shells for protection. Peanut worms are deposit or suspension feeders. This means that they use their extendable proboscis covered with tentacles to collect organic material and microorganisms from substrate or water columns. And for reproduction and life cycle, peanut worms reproduce sexually, and most species are dioecious, which is separate sexes, although a few are hermaphroditic, which means
hermaphroditic,
which means they reproduce as both female and male. They release eggs and sperm into the water for external fertilization, and the larvae are planktonic, which means free swimming, and eventually settle on the substrate to develop into adults. Some species can regenerate body parts, aiding in survival. For anthropogenic effect, human activities such as habitat destruction can harm peanut worm populations. Additionally, climate change, including ocean acidification and temperature changes, may threaten the survival by disrupting their habitats and life cycles. Here are all of our sources in APA citation.
Thanks for watching.